Welcome to 5 at 5 with Stone Law Offices. I'm attorney Brendan Bybee with 5 minutes on pay on death designations and your revocable trust planning. Now, when you get a trust, one of the first things that you have to do, the homework that you're left with, in order to make sure that you benefit from all of the reasons that you got that revocable living trust and put that together, is you've got to get your property into the trust. A lot of times when people have a lot of assets, maybe they have a number of different bank accounts between them and a spouse. For whatever reason, they may have multiple checking and savings accounts that they've established over the years that they continue to maintain. Now, transferring all of these into a trust may seem like a daunting bit of homework. And so in some cases, some may want to look for a shortcut in terms of getting those assets into the trust. Now, generally speaking, that means to get the bank account into the trust, you have to go and you have to either have the bank change the ownership over if they'll do it that way, and so that the account stays the same, but the ownership is now listed as being the trust, or else the bank may require you to open up a new account and then take the assets from the old account, transfer them into the new account, and close the old account out. Another way that you can get assets into the trust without having to go through or bank accounts, specifically, another similar assets into the trust without having to go through that process, but still avoiding probate, is using a pay on death designation or transfer on death designation, POD or TOD, with that financial institution. Now, these are great in terms of, yes, at death, they do not become estate assets. They're going to transfer immediately to the new owner, whether that's a trust or an individual. But it's not going to be immediate because you're going to still have to present a death certificate to show that that person, the original owner, died to make that transfer occur. But there's another reason why this isn't ideal, especially when you are have a trust set up which has the advantages that it does. Now, the advantages of a trust, that comes back to the advantages of a trust are not just for administration of that property at your death, but there are lifetime benefits that you can have. Now, a revocable living trust doesn't give you asset protection. It doesn't give you, at least during your lifetime, necessarily any tax advantages. It may have tax planning in there for spouses where it can avail itself of certain post-death planning and maximizing of your estate tax exemption for those who have a real concern about that. But otherwise, during your lifetime, the benefits are a little bit different. It's the same as though you own the property yourself, except that during your lifetime, if you become incapacitated, because of trust, essentially, you've got three roles. You've got the grantor, the person who set the trust up, the trustee who manages the property, and the beneficiary. Generally, you fill all three roles, and so it's the same before you have the trust as afterwards, and you're dealing with the property, except that you've got that trustee part there. And that trustee is solely responsible to manage the property. And if that's you, and you become incapacitated during your lifetime, you're still the grantor, you're still the beneficiary, but you can't be the trustee. You can't manage that anymore. And that's why a trust is so beneficial. You have your assets in there, you provided for the management, you decide who's going to manage that for you while you still remain a beneficiary and they can care for you. And so that's one of the great advantages. You don't have to have a guardianship proceeding in order to appoint somebody to manage that property for you during your lifetime. And so that avoids that court process and that becoming public and that ongoing court involvement in your estate. So when it comes back then to the question of how do I get my bank accounts into my trust, yes, a POD or TOD with the financial institution is going to get that property to the trust without having to go through a probate process. But since that only occurs at death, it does nothing to help you in terms of that planning and benefiting from having that trust to use that POD during your lifetime. If you become incapacitated, it's not a trust asset yet. And so now whoever is in charge of the trust is going to have to is not going to be able to manage that property yet unless it's transferred to the trust. And the only way anybody is going to be able to get access to that is either through a power of attorney or through a court appointment as guardian. Now, powers of attorney can avoid going through guardianship to some extent, but if you have a lot of assets, it's going to be a long period of time, depending on how the bank deals with that. Sometimes that's not the most efficient way, and you still may end up having to have some guardianship, and the guardianship court may take some control over what happens with that property. So again, to avoid the necessity for those processes, to avoid the annoying presence of or need for court intervention to deal with your property, instead of going the simple route of just using that POD, which again, it's certainly a way that you can handle that, but for most things, it's not ideal. You're dealing with perhaps having to rely on powers of attorney to manage that property if you're incapacitated, and you fail to take advantage of the benefits that are already provided for you in your revocable living trust. If you need, a lot of times you need a little bit of help getting all those assets into your trust. It can be daunting to put all of them into the trust, and that's why we do offer funding services. And if you need help getting all of your assets into the trust so that you can benefit from that trust in your lifetime, as well as for your beneficiaries upon your death, please give us a call and we'd be happy to help.